Yeah, that was it was a competitive game, but OU is obviously, it's just something we haven't seen really in a long, long time since back before Stoops began. And, it looked like they kind of turned the corner. They did. It was competitive, but they still have to finish games off and get one more win to get to a bowl game.
I mean, the two topics, the way he's coming at it are kind of, different, or not even the way he's coming at it. I mean, the loss to Baylor is one thing on Saturday. The rest of that's another thing entirely. Now, one might be a symptom of the other, but, I mean, yeah, Baylor played better. Baylor had 3 first-half turnovers, and Baylor won by a field goal, when all was said and done. So that was not anywhere close to the best Oklahoma team that we've seen in recent years. And yet, they were still sitting there with an opportunity to win that game. Now, as to his other, so here's where I am. I think Brent Venables is a fine head coach for right now. I really don't know what to expect and how quickly to expect it moving forward because the SEC wild card just throws everything for a loop. If they were sticking around in the Big 12, then I could confidently say, just give them a little bit of time. They'll be fine. Just give them a recruiting class or two, transfer portal, and they'll be back in no time. But you go from an era where you had Heisman quarterback after Heisman quarterback after Heisman quarterback. You don't just lose that and then just this guy was better or is better. It's no, you don't just overcome that right away and that quickly, no matter if you go get Dylan Gabriel or not. I mean, they were in a special run with Lincoln Riley, and the ending was really bad. And maybe he reached his ceiling. I have no idea. But, yeah, the thought that this was just going to not skip a beat when Caleb Williams is out the door and Lincoln Riley's out the door and all these others are out the door, I mean, you had to have known, this was not going to be the typical 10-2, and that's a bad year type of year. But yet there was a very loud, and maybe he was just trying to, deal with it, was how they, just convince yourself, no, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. No, it's really not. And this year, it's not been a disaster, but yeah, they're 5-4, and it's mid-November practically, and they're not bowl eligible. For Oklahoma to not be bowl eligible by mid-November is not normal in any way, shape, or form the last 20 years, really. So, I mean, this year as a whole, I think it's been a learning curve. I think it's been baby steps and then 1 step forward, 2 steps back, and it's been a lot in the air. I'm not worried about them, short term. I think Venables will do okay. And this year I can understand. I'm not stepping on the edge of a cliff because they're 5-4. But in the long-term outlook, I've been saying this for a while now. I don't love the SEC move, and I never have, and I don't know that I ever will. Because I do think it puts them dangerously closer towards being a South Carolina than it does being an Oklahoma. And, you can tell me about all the riches and the great primetime matchups and all these things that come in with the, being in the SEC will give them. And I get that in the era of NIL, Oklahoma will still be attractive, and now they'll have more money than ever. But the problem is, man, is they went from being a great white with maybe one other great white that they were actually bigger than, because when it came down to fighting, they'd normally win that fight, to now being in there with 5 or 6 other great whites, and a couple of them are better than them all time, and a few of them are better than them right now. And that's not going to change just because Brent Venables has an off season. You know what I mean? And so I hope they know what they got themselves into. I know, security-wise, they'll never have to fret ever. Oklahoma football will, be healthy as ever in terms of finances and matchups and TV time and all that stuff, man. But as far as the success goes, one of the first things I think I said was all those people that were taking title after title after title for granted. The Big 12 stinks. Who cares about winning the Big 12? We've done that year after year. Who cares? Okay. I understand why you kind of got bored with it and you play with your food a little bit, but you're biting off a whole lot more now than you were ever trying to attempt to chew before. And I think people know that, but I don't know how many people really know that, because I don't see just some smooth entrance off into the SEC where everything's the way that Oklahoma fans have known them to be for the last couple decades in particular.
By the way, Sir blah, 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 the Holy Roman Empire was neither Holy Roman nor an empire. Yeah, thank you very much.
I think that, if Lincoln Riley was still there and he was a lifer at OU, then that transition would be certainly easier, because quarterback-wise, he has that magic touch of being able to call up a quarterback and going, would you like to win a Heisman Trophy? Brent Venables doesn't have that pelt in his wall yet. And Jeff Lebby kind of does because he was on the staff with RG3, but he was a little further down the chain when that happened. And so they've got things that they have to overcome, and it's still 2 more years, 2 more seasons in the Big 12. They have to fight out of doing it and try to get some sort of lead going in, and nobody in the SEC is going to sit and wait for you. So you better hope that.
Well, it's like, okay, Jackson Arnold's coming in. Great. So is Arch Manning. So is Iamaleava at Tennessee. So, I mean, everybody's going to have their version of Jackson Arnold. So, like, I see that, and that's a place to point to that's a positive is like, hey, there's a great quarterback coming in, but a bunch of other teams that are right there at your level have great quarterbacks coming in too. Like, that's not just the magic fixer. And Dylan Gabriel's not the only reason they lost that game on Saturday. He played a big role in it with those 3 interceptions, but those were deflections, and for the most part. And that wasn't all on his shoulders. But, yeah, I mean, it's Oklahoma. I don't feel like the sky's falling and they're not going to be making bowl games with regularity or anything like that. But I said this at the very beginning when they were first announced towards the SEC of just like those days of taking Big 12 titles year after year after year for granted and basically having a cakewalk into the college football playoff so long as you handled your business like you were expected to do. Those days are over. All caps over. And how they get back to even approaching those days and how long that takes is going to be a big question. I don't think they're Missouri, but I don't think they're also just waltzing in and being the next Alabama either, you know?
We've discussed this, 2 fan bases that have probably rarely ever in their lifetime been rejected by anybody were rejected when Notre Dame lost Brian Kelly, and they all but basically torched his everything and brought in a guy, Marcus Freeman, who hopefully will have success there. And it was the crack of all jokes. Brian Kelly this and that, and Freeman's recruiting. And I like Marcus Freeman's a good dude. And then Lincoln Riley. Notre Dame and Oklahoma. Chuck Fairbanks left Oklahoma to go to the NFL, like some coaches do. After that, Switzer left because he was forced out. They would still love for him to be there, and he was an amazing coach there. And then they went through Gibbs, Snellenberger, and John Blake for a decade. Stoops comes in, unbelievable run. And now they have Lincoln Riley for a short term, 2 fan bases, and most anything else, they're bitter because somebody actually said they thought something else was better other than Chuck Fairbanks, and that was the NFL.
It's also just not fair to the new coach to be like, hey, you're automatically going to be better than this guy that we just did. Just let him get to his spot.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was coping.
Yeah,
Paul.
Venables was
that's
a
what it is.
reaction,
Like that's like I understand it. Like people were trying to convince themselves, I know everything's gonna be okay. Like I said, and you had to know, like losing Lincoln Riley and then going and getting Brent Venables. It's just not that simple. And you know, I'm obviously I'm an Oklahoma fan. I still believe in the program. I'm like, I don't want this to sound like sky is falling. It's just more of, you know, the realization as we get farther down the line, and here they are, and it's November 7th, and they still need another win to get to a bowl game. Like, they're not in the SEC yet. You know what I mean? So hopefully Venables does improve and get better, and there's reasons to believe that they will, but it's just that future is not as certain as it used to look.
One thing, though, and I know the SEC has won a bucket load of national titles. We're not trying to argue that, but there is no Vanderbilt on this schedule. There is no gimme on this schedule. Though there have been in the past, and basically whoever Oklahoma played as good as they were and dominant as they were, there was a gimme or so that they could just basically show up and they're going to win, as Switzer used to say, by hanging a half 100. And then Stoops' teams did that for the longest of time. So,
are you saying that in regards to winning another game? Or just in general, there's not a gimme?
The rest of their schedule that they have this year, I'm not saying they may win 3 in a row. They play at West Virginia. They're a mess. Oklahoma State, they're a mess.
Yeah.
Texas Tech in Lubbock, well, we'll see what happens where they are in 3 weeks. All right, good stuff. Great comments, great opinions. Kendall Cal, appreciate his time. Come back with a